why are you still single? And I wanted to come on live and just talk about this. If you're here in real time, give me a shout out. Let me know that you're here. Let me know if this applies to you. If you're here after the event, thanks for being here. This question gets asked quite a lot to me and in people in this space. And it's also something that exists as a kind of dominant preoccupation or a kind of presupposition that people can have. That's a sort of fancy word, but basically just meaning there's almost a presupposition that I should be in a relationship or should be capable of a relationship, and so it's a problem if I'm not. And it might be a problem if I'm not in a relationship because I want to be in a relationship, but I might also be being hard on myself that I'm not in a relationship. So I just wanted to go sort of meta and practical on this and give a few different perspectives on this question, why am I still single, in case it actually helps bring you more peace and also more understanding of your situation. That's kind of my hope in jumping on and talking about this. So there's a few buckets that we can answer this question from. So the first bucket is kind of like the self-inquiry, self-help bucket. So this would be something like you are inquiring into yourself to find out the inner work that you might be able to do that will allow you to not be single, right? So this could be something like, I'm single because I've been hurt in the past, either in upbringing or in a previous romantic relationship, and either consciously or unconsciously, I've made a decision that I don't want to get close to someone. So even though part of me perhaps wants to be in a relationship, another part is still protecting me, which is completely understandable. And if you think, for instance, if you've ever had an injury, if you ever, let's say, hurt your back, and you suddenly, your body will get really stiff in order to stabilize the injury, right? So that's the kind of natural body response. And then it's the one that also is challenging if it doesn't resolve longer term, right? So immediately we want to say, hey, let's lock it down. We don't want you to get further hurt, right? So that sometimes your heart will close off instinctively, effectively, and appropriately so that you don't get hurt more. But if we stay with that heart closed, it then creates problems for the longer term. If the back stays stiff, then I'm going to struggle to run and move and jump and do all the things that a body can do. So it's short-term good, long-term bad. Similarly, closing off your heart, short-term good, long-term bad, because now it's denying you the connection, the intimacy, the giving and receiving of love that you want. Now, how to relax a closed heart or how to open a closed heart, that's not a trivial question. Part of that is a desire. Part of it is risk, courage, practice. Part of it is discernment, right? Noticing, is this a good place for me to open my heart? Part of it is slowly, like slowness is your friend. So you can gradually see, I'm opening a little bit more, I'm opening a little bit more. So we could talk about that more. Let me know if you want me to talk about that more. But that's sort of one avenue of self-inquiry, right? Is that I could be a bit closed off for good reason, but now it's hurting my relationships. Another avenue of inquiry could be something like I'm super independent, right? Which in many ways is a gift and a blessing, right? There's many blessings that come from independence, self-reliance, being able to take care of yourself, pay your bills, put a roof over your head, take care of, children or family members, or co-workers, lead a fulfilling and independent life, right? The challenge can be is if independence is itself a subtle form of defense, because it means I don't need to depend on other people. Now, again, that might be necessary because you may have had a situation where you didn't have anyone that you could depend on, or maybe you had a situation where you depended upon someone and then you regretted it, or you depended upon someone and then they got seriously ill, or they passed, or they left, or, so there's a lot of good reasons why, again, consciously or unconsciously, you may have decided not to depend on anyone, or not to depend fully on anyone, and you get some of the upside of that, right? There's definitely upsides to independence and self-reliance, but then you also get some of the downsides, which it can get in the way of the intimacy and the connection that you want, particularly if part of your true nature is more feminine in its essence, which can mean that you actually like to depend on something, let's call it trustworthy masculine. That's not the only thing you can depend on, but it's one thing you might want to depend on that actually feels good to you, to not have to carry all the burdens of life, to have, someone at times take care of you, to be able to receive from other people, whether that's a partner or just to receive from life, to receive support, to basically receive, is part of that feminine essence. And that is what can get compromised when you are super independent. Now, you don't have to give up all of the independence, right? So this is where higher level development is nuanced. Often people solve issues, or not just in development, they often solve it in politics as well. We could get into that. But higher level development, people solve it by sort of staying a bit black and white, right? So either I'm all dependent, right? I'm all sort of independent. And integrated development, higher level development, is actually about transcending and including. So we're going to be both of those things. So it's harder. It's a higher order integration, and it's asking a little bit more of you. So it may be that you can introspect enough to notice, this independence, which maybe I've seen as mostly a really positive thing, I can still hold it that way, but I can also notice, it's costing me over here, and I actually want to learn how to lean in a bit more. I want to learn how to, cultivate interdependence, right? Which is this sort of a blend of dependence and independence and dependence, right? So that can all sound very kind of conceptual, but it basically means, I don't necessarily need someone in order to survive or to take care of me, but I actually like it when someone wants to do that, and I let them in that way, and it's a good choice for me to let them in that way. And maybe my independence is also an answer to a problem in the past, right? Maybe I felt really controlled or betrayed, and independence was the answer to that. And it was the rightful answer, right? In the same way that the back that gets stiff after the injury is the right answer in the short term, we all have to do all sorts of things to get out of difficult circumstances, to transcend childhood, to bootstrap ourselves. And then the question becomes, in the fullness of time, can I relax the thing that sort of saved me in order to let in the thing, in this instance, love, support, if you have a feminine essence, a masculine essence, or if you have a masculine essence, a feminine essence, or just another person into your life in a way that's meaningful. And that can be hard, because it's going to bring, it's going to bring stuff up. I can notice that place in myself where it's like, sometimes I don't want to be dependent. I want all the freedom and independence, right? And so that's a place of practice. It's a place of learning for any of us. So those are some of the kind of typical self-inquiry routes. And that self-inquiry is really important. The question in some ways is, what's the context that you're holding in it? Meaning, can you actually do that self-inquiry from a loving place? Right? Because it can be easy to turn this into a subtle form of inner critic in the back door, where, I should be in a relationship, I shouldn't be single, or I should learn how to lean in. None of these things is easy. It's actually about a compassionate self-inquiry, right? The compassionate self-inquiry will notice, I had to do that. Wow, that's really tough. I had to learn how to do that. I might have learned to do that as a 8, 12, 15, 21, 31, whatever year old, 51-year-old. I learned to do a thing that I had to do, and now it's kind of costing me a little bit. So really, if you're doing this as true inquiry, there could be other things come up, right? There could be anger, frustration, disappointment, but there also hopefully is at least a little bit of self-compassion in there. Like, wow, yeah, that's tricky. That's hard. That's hard that I had to do that, Now, the blessing of this is, if you think of relationship as a path, right? You actually don't just want a linear path. If you've ever been on a road trip, it can be fun for a little bit. If you're doing, what road trips have I done? Colorado to California. When I-80 is completely straight for a while, okay, it's fine. It's interesting to me as a Brit. We don't tend to have roads that are just long and straight quite like that for as long. But really, the interesting road trips are actually the ones where there's a bit more variety, right? And there's some twists and some turns in the road. And for most of us, relationship is that, right? It's twists and turns in the road. It's pain, it's learning, it's problems, it's healing childhood wounds, it's discovering new childhood wounds. It's a lot. And sometimes you might look at other people and think, wouldn't it just be easier to have the linear road? Maybe, but it might also not be as interesting, and it might not also be as developmental, and it might not also be just as true to your path in this lifetime, right? However that's put together, whether you think of that as random, divine, whatever your kind of metaphysics are, just you as an essence unfolding through time in this life, relationship is probably going to teach you some stuff, right? And it might teach you your most profound lessons, and sometimes that comes, unfortunately, from pain, but ultimately the learning can be really rich. So can you root that compassion in, that self-inquiry in some form of compassion? outside of that sort of whole bucket of self-inquiry, there's another thing that's happening, which is, sort of sociological change. Now, I don't tend to talk about this that much. I don't know if I know quite so much about that. My path has very much been in the kind of coaching, self-development world. But I did study sociology at Cambridge. That was part of my degree. So I'm not understanding of some sociology. The sociology of relationships is also changing, right? So people are not opting to be in relationships maybe as much as they have been in the past. There's been the impact of the global pandemic. There's the impact of modern dating apps, that whole culture. The younger generations, in a sense, being less likely to want to be in a committed style of relationship. All these other flavors of sort of partially or somewhat open relationships that some people are into, some people are really averse to. But just the landscape is evolving. And so that is also having an impact. If someone's in the path of singleness, it's like, there might just be more single people at a certain point in time. There might also be more single people in a certain area, in a certain gender at a certain time. I don't know if you've had this experience. If you've traveled and you turn on a dating app in a different geography, you might just get a different experience. You might have much more or less interest based upon you doing nothing different, but just being in a different geography, where either your particular, profile attributes are more attractive to people in that area, or just because there's a different balance in the dating market, right? Maybe there's many more men or many more women, or many more men or women of a certain, age or demographic. So I'm putting this out there. I don't tend to focus on the sociology because the empowerment, I think, is often in bucket one, right? Which is the self-inquiry, the self-responsibility. But sometimes the compassion can come from, in a world of changing relationship and dating dynamics, I might be part of that, right? If you put it in another context, in an economic context, if unemployment goes from 2 to 20%, there's a lot of people are going to be impacted by that, right? Who might be trying to explain it through, why do I deserve to be unemployed? Maybe a more powerful question is, can I be with the fact that there are forces that are bigger than me that are also impacting my, economic landscape? So sometimes the sociological thing can also just give you a little bit of, take the pressure off you, right? Take the pressure off you. And then the third bucket is sort of like the mystery bucket, which is kind of, you don't always have to understand things. And, believe me, I'm talking to myself when I say this, because I love to try to understand things, to find a nuanced understanding, to be willing to evolve my worldview to fit a better understanding of what's going on. For me, it's easier to be with my emotional experience when I feel like I understand. So I'm like, okay, that wasn't great that this and this happened, but I kind of get it, right? It's sort of like, okay, I missed the golf shot because the ball went in the sand bunker. Okay, now it's a little easier for me to let go. But sometimes life might present circumstances where you don't really understand, right? You might have had, let's see, a thing that commonly people come to me, right? They're attached to a guy who cannot or will not be in a relationship with them, in a kind of committed primary relationship with them. And that can cause a set of doubt and confusion, obviously pain, and you might be on that sort of merry-go-round of like, you sort of get it, you sort of don't, you kind of let him go, he kind of comes back in, he says something a little bit different, you get some false hope, you kind of get back on the merry-go-round, then you sort of think nothing's really changed, but he thinks it has. And so eventually, maybe, say with my help, if we enter into group coaching or they, work with me individually, maybe we get a handle on the situation, right, where they actually can cut it off. Now, whether that means they will fully understand everything that guy said to them, possibly not. Sometimes my job as coach is to say, you keep wanting this guy's behavior to be rational, and you and I have no assurance that his behavior is rational. And from everything I'm hearing, his behavior actually isn't rational. Now, I don't have to make him wrong, right? We all have rational and non-rational parts of ourselves. Being human isn't purely an exercise in rationality. And, he may be saying things that are partially true from him. He may be completely confused. He may be in a period of, discombobulation, disintegration in his own life. His own understanding may not match his circumstances. He may be in over his head. He may be all sorts of things. So the freedom comes from not looking at him and thinking, we're going to be able to explain this. The actual freedom is, I'm no longer imagining clarity coming over from there. So what I'm getting is confusion. I'm actually processing, this is confusion, he is confusion. And so I'm going to stop looking for answers. And maybe if there's answers, I'm going to find them over here. And maybe I'll never get answers. And that can sound scary to a part of you that wants answers or that wants the world to kind of conform to rational understanding. But there's also a kind of freedom and liberation in not having to understand, or sort of almost offering it a bit like a prayer or a kind of hope to life, saying, if you need me to understand, kind of let me know, right? We talk about things being on a need to know basis, right? If I need to know, let me know. But until then, I'm not actually going to put more of my precious time, energy, and heart in trying to rationalize my way into something which is actually perhaps deeper than my own understanding right now. Or actually, I don't really need to know. All I need to know is this guy's not available, and that's what I need to know. Now, when I say it, it sounds light and trivial. I know it can be incredibly painful, heavy. I know even from my own previous experiences, being attached to someone that doesn't want to commit to you is incredibly painful. So none of this is about trivializing the feelings. It's saying that the kind of the quicker self-loving path for you is actually to kind of get out of your head with it and to just try and see as succinctly and clearly, this isn't going anywhere. This is confused, and I need to kind of step off that kind of conveyor belt. So those are my 3 ways into thinking about, okay, if I'm still single. And notice none of them is about being hard on yourself, right? None of them is a question that's rooted in doubt or frustration. Why am I still single? Why does it work for other people? Why can't I get into a relationship? They're not powerful questions, right? They're actually questions of self-criticism and self-doubt. We will all at times lapse into self-criticism and self-doubt. The job is to notice it and then not to think you need to answer those questions. Imagine you met someone for the first time and suddenly they started asking you a very bizarre, personal, and invasive line of questioning. You wouldn't need to answer those questions, right? The appropriate thing would be to say, who are you? I don't want to answer your questions. Those aren't appropriate questions. I don't feel comfortable to answer those questions. It's a similar thing. If your self-doubt and inner critic asks you a bunch of questions, why aren't you in a relationship? Why are you making this so hard? Why are your standards so high? Why couldn't you just make it work? Why doesn't he love you? You should be lovable. What's the problem with you? None of these are real inquiry questions, right? They're self-critical questions. So the job is to nix those and to see if you can ask more powerful questions, right? Is there anything I'm being invited to learn? Is there any perspective on relationship that I'm attached to that is actually limiting me now? Is there anything that I decided unconsciously to solve a problem in the past, right, to protect my heart or to give me independence, which now is limiting me? These are more powerful questions. They're open-ended questions. They come with curiosity. So, all right, I'm just going to flick on. I've seen a few messages come through here. Let me see. Hello, Sandy. Let's see, which way is this? Let's go back to the top. 1 second. Let me try and get all messages here. Love and Other Problems. Hi, I like your name there. Tina, hey Jack, how you doing? I'm good. It's been a very lazy day, but kind of good lazy. Very enlightening about being independent, says Melanie. I've never been able to count on anyone else. Yeah, I get it. So, one of the gifts of knowing that you can have your own back, there is something really beautiful about that, right? That there is a part of life which is an individuated experience, right? There is a sort of sense that, you come into this world, some of your struggles, some of your experience is subjective. There's a way that only you will fully know that experience. And there's also this real thing that most of us want, which is about connection and intimacy and support and friendship and love. And it might be just opening the possibility. If I haven't experienced a thing, doesn't mean that I can't experience a thing. So it's just that little open-mindedness, like, I'm open, I'm available. That doesn't mean I'm gonna suddenly rush into trust someone, or doesn't mean I necessarily need to change a whole set of things. It's just that kind of openness of, what would it be like if someone trustworthy came into my life? How would I even know? How would I practice leaning in with someone? And by the way, this doesn't have to be an intimate partner. This could be, a coworker. I always say this. one authentic friend or one authentic mentor, worth their weight in gold, in my experience, right? If you've got a whole community of authentic friendships, amazing. But a lot of us don't have that, For a lot of us, actually just having one or two real authentic friendships, or even friendships that over time can grow to be more authentic, really valuable. So it might even be easier to be practicing this not in the context of intimate relationship, because intimate relationship tends to throw up a whole set of unique dynamics, often more based upon our early caregiving or early romantic experiences. So sometimes they're a little bit of a bucket unto themselves, or sometimes they are the sort of on steroids version of what might be happening in other relationships. But because it kind of, the power of it is that intimate relationships show you stuff that you can sometimes not have to fully contend with in, say, friendships. The disadvantage is sometimes that can be such a sort of a thing to be with. It might make it harder to work. So when I've worked with people one-on-one who find it hard to feel supported, we have them practice, right? This week, go make 3 requests for support. Go ask 3 people to support you in some way that is meaningful to you. And it's actually not about whether they say yes or no. It's about you practicing, noticing what you want and asking for support. Now, there's a little risk. The little risk is you ask a ton of people and no one supports you. And you might actually notice that if you make specific requests, people actually maybe do want to support you, right? Or maybe the first request they don't, right? If your request is, can you come help me clean out the garage? Maybe they don't want to. But if the request is, I would just love to go watch this movie and I've been putting it off and I want to go with someone, would you? So then you sort of start to kind of calibrate to what types of support are available from different people. That's sort of the beauty of having, different friendships in some ways, right? People can support you differently. If you're going to all different types of people and no one seemingly wants to support you, then we could imagine that might be something on your side of the fence, not from self-criticism, just from self-love, noticing that, like, okay, what might that be, right? Is there a way that I'm asking where I sort of anticipate them saying no, so I kind of say it in a very doubtful, hesitant way? Do I ask people for too little or too much? Too little, they might not realize the support's meaningful. Too much, and I might not, I don't know, want to fund your latest business venture, right? So is it sober, right? Not too little, not too much. If none of that works, go model someone. Find a friend who seems to be well supported and ask them about their experience, and they might teach you some stuff or just be in some perspectives that you're not in. They might be in a sort of very team player mindset, let's say, and you have much more of a kind of lone wolf kind of mindset, right? Again, not better or worse, just kind of different, and we can kind of learn from each other. Or if you're kind of courageous, you could ask someone who doesn't want to support you, like, hey, I'm practicing, blame me. I often say to people, blame me. Jack asked me to practice getting more support in my life, and I'm practicing, and I don't even know what I should ask. Is there anything that you want to do together, Or I notice whenever I ask you for something, it seems like it doesn't really happen, yet I feel very available to do something for you. So is this like an imbalanced thing, or what's going on? And sometimes you might have to be in the conflict and the heat of something, but it can be enlightening. I even say this in dating, right? Sometimes asking the people that don't want to date you, kind of like, hey, what's going on? If you got a little bit of the self-fortitude to do that, you can actually find out a lot of really interesting information that maybe your girlfriends can't quite reflect back to you, say, in the same way because you haven't dated them. I'm independent, make a lot of money, and can't even find a man to go out for a drink. I've gotten to a point to where I feel this is ridiculous. Okay, so that's interesting. So does that mean you don't meet men, or does it mean that you meet plenty of men? Sounds more like this, but none of them actually want to take you on a date. So you could, if you want to risk it, do what I'm saying here, is just ask a bunch of men that you've met. Let's say you go down the bar, there's some regulars there, you meet them, whatever, and after a while you're just going to say, hey, would you be interested in taking me on a date? And if they say no, you ask them, I'm just curious, could you tell me more about that? Now you risk hearing some things. You risk hearing some things you don't want to hear, or people might not meet you there, or they might say something that's a lie, or there's all sorts of things that could happen in that space. But you also have your intuition and awareness, and if you're asking from a genuine place, or if let's say you've matched with a lot of guys on dating apps, but none of them want to take you on a date. You could get curious about that. Now, obviously, there are a whole bunch of men on dating apps that aren't really taking any women on dates, so it could be that a bunch of these is just on their side of the fence. But there might just be something there that's available to learn. And sometimes it's also about redirecting your energy, right? So you just get quicker to cut off connections where it's like, yeah, probably not going anywhere, you know? So you can, for instance, have if they haven't responded to me within X period of time, I just kind of nix it, right? And for some people that might be 3 days, for some people that might be a week, for some people that might be 24 hours, just sort of like, and that's not to say that they may not have responded eventually, but you might just say, I'm kind of a betting person and I want to back the horses that I think are more likely to win. So I'm not backing the 100-1, I'm backing the 7-1. And that person typically responds mostly within 24 hours because I've sort of noticed if they don't, there's a lethargy in the connection. I don't like having to do everything for myself with no help ever. I prefer more balance and partnership. Yeah, I totally hear you. I think that's a nice way to live. Hello, Jack, you're looking very well. Thanks. Probably because I've been lying on the couch most of the day. Okay, I'm a widow. Hello, Jeanette. Thanks for being here. Happy evening to all. Very independent, but very lonely. Yeah, I hear you. I think that's a big thing going on in the world right now. In gross-orienting generalization, I feel like I hear this perhaps more than I once did. I have my own experience of that as well. I think there's a lot of men having experiences of loneliness. And conversely, in gross-orienting generalization, men tend to get fewer sort of, men swipe right more often, right? So men tend to get fewer kind of yeses, more nos when it comes to dating apps. So I also think that combination of male loneliness combined with like maybe not getting a lot of interest on the apps that then tends to kind of lead to lowest common denominator behavior. It's not a great mix for anyone involved, I don't think. How does a 49-year-old single non-drinker meet anyone? So I just heard this the other day. I don't know how common it is yet, but I sense it's going to be the beginning of a bigger trend locally here. So this is DC. There are some bars that are basically non-alcoholic bars that are getting set up because I think this segment is growing, particularly also generationally. Like people want to be social, but they actually don't want to drink alcohol. So how does a 49-year-old single non-drinker meet anyone? Well, you don't have any friends and no social life. It means you don't leave home. Yeah, no, I hear you. So, I'm a fan of people engaging in any form of group activities, So, Meetup, for instance, has a whole set of, hikes, bike rides, excursions, pub meets, probably coffee meets. I think anywhere you can tap into the co-working scene, right? So even if you work from home or from yourself, like there's places that you can go and take your laptop, go meet people, go work at the coffee shop. Really trying to tune into your local events. Going down to the dog park, even if you don't have a dog, right? If you love dogs, people tend to be sociable in those sorts of instances. Paint and sip, wine tasting, like there's, it will vary area by area, but that I'm always surprised. Sometimes when I, and there's a decent amount that goes on to this in this area, but even when I was living back in Colorado, like there's just so much that goes on. Sometimes when I tap into it, I'm like, oh my God, there's like 50 things that I would go to if I had the energy. There's like so much stuff going on. And sometimes you just have to dig a little to kind of get into the channels, like which are the local magazines or which are the online websites that do a good job of curating everything that's going on. If you don't know what that site is, kind of Google around till you find it or ask some people or just get down to the library and look at all the local newspapers or the coffee shop or buy the local newspapers, like just kind of tap into the stream. Because I've sort of found once you've got multiple places to access information, they're actually all reporting a lot of the similar events. There's just a lot of stuff that's going on. Michelle says what Christy Lee said. Okay, so that's kind of striking a nerve. I've realized I'm not who I need to be to attract what I want. Okay, I'm curious to know more about that. I hope that can be held in a honest and self-loving way, focused on healing and growing. Yeah, okay, because this is one of the big questions, right? People want to say, do you need to heal kind of before you get into a relationship, right? And that's a sort of partial truth, meaning having a period of time of singleness where you can focus on self and self-healing can be really potent. Relationships can also be healing. Relationships can also be wounding. So most people's healing will involve getting into relationships. Sometimes I think, and I don't think this is culturally well understood, there's probably a stage of development where we're actually going to get into different relationships possibly as part of our healing, right? I don't think that path is for everyone, but I think there is a path where different relationships, quote, give you relationship lessons. They kind of wake you up in certain ways, right? Maybe you realize, oh gosh, I'm an overgiver, right? So life gives you the narcissist and you're like, oh, okay, so now I really get it. Because if I overgive to someone who's neutral or somewhat giving, that can sort of work, or I can sort of get carried by it and just keep doing that. But then if I really get the narcissist, I realize, whoa, this completely screws me over. So yes, I might be angry at the narcissist, but I can also take that anger and, again, not in blame, but in self-love, notice, oh, there's a thing here that I'm susceptible to because I've sort of got a persona where I overgive. Even if my true heart is service, I've still got a sort of persona over the top, and that's the opportunity. So sometimes, you might have the relationship, and then as you're kind of coming out of it, learning about it, sometimes licking your wounds, but the awareness can be, this is a really potent opportunity for me to actually kind of heal and grow. So I don't hold it hard and fast, like you definitely need to be single for this period of time, or you definitely need to be in a relationship. I think there's a little bit more uniqueness. I think it's an openness to what's needed. Sometimes the season of your life, you're just really drawn to want to relate. Sometimes maybe the season is that you're not, or sometimes you're like, the last 4 guys I related with, kind of the same thing happened. So why don't I just take a moment, hit my journal, come off the dating apps, and just actually be in my singleness for a bit and see if there's something for me to learn here, right? So I generally am a fan of slowing it down, whether that's getting into a relationship, whether that's, respecting singleness. Story of my life, Jack, always available for others, but never available for me. Yeah, so that could be the old story of your life, right? Like that, to me, I hear you, sounds like some good self-awareness. That can be really hard. But remember, stories, in a sense, aren't the full truth, right? So a story is sometimes a good way of describing what is true, but a story can also be attached to a past version of ourselves or keep us in a past version of ourselves. So you can, write new stories, you can relax old stories, you can actually have less story about your life, and then it opens up more ways of being. So what for you, for instance, what would it be like to have a period of your life where you're actually all about you? With the first thing, whatever someone says, do you want to go for a walk? You're like, do I want to go for a walk? You get up in the morning, think, what do I want to do? And you'll practice first thing in the day, 3 things that I want to do for me today. Doesn't even matter whether you fully actualize on them, but that becomes more of the focus. If someone asks you to do something, you have to snooze it for 24 hours. You don't even have the right to say yes. So you can put some practices in that can really help with that. Brisbane, Australia. Yeah, Merry Christmas. I'm procrastinating just taking pictures, let alone registering on dating apps. Please advise. Yeah, so it's okay to get on a dating app without an incomplete profile, right? Step 1 could just be activating a profile. Generally, for those of us that procrastinate, right, and pretty much everyone has domains of their life that they procrastinate, right? Even super sort of on it people maybe procrastinate on their healing, right? Because they're so focused on go, do, and healing is kind of uncomfortable and often a bit slower and nonlinear. So we're all in this boat in some ways. Generally, we have to step into action before we feel comfortable, right? So we actually have to just embrace this is going to be uncomfortable. A bit like going to the dentist, right? You don't say, well, I'll go to the dentist when the dentist promises it's going to be comfortable. Well, by that point, you're going to have worse damage because it's actually just better to get to the dentist. So let's step into a little bit of the discomfort, honor that's going to be that, sometimes you can attach a thing that you like to a thing you don't like, right? So if I get myself on this dating app, I get to go spend, $7 on my favorite, Starbucks frothy drink, or I get to, rent a kayak or go on a hike or go to the movies or get my nails done, whatever your thing is. Just as I didn't enjoy doing this, it's uncomfortable. So I kind of have a little bit of self-love in another way. yeah, the other thing you could do is book a date with a girlfriend, let's say, who maybe also is wanting to date or is dating, and just say, hey, Wednesday night we're going to get together and we're going to get this done, or at least we're going to get the first step done and get it moving. So it can also be helpful to get someone else involved if we're procrastinating. Healing a lot of my physical issues, is Christy. Yeah, healed my emotional ones, but too many physical ones now to heal makes it difficult to get out. Yeah, that can be tricky. I know what it's like to have had like limited mobility. It is difficult, and it also creates other kind of potential issues. So sometimes I think it's just focusing on the thing that you can do. You know what I mean? Like if all you can do is walk around the block, it's like, make sure you do that, or if you're too tired to walk around the block, like go for a drive, and if you're like too tired to walk around the block and you kind of don't have a car, but your friend has a car, like, can you go for a drive with them, or if no one has a car, like get on the bus, or order an Uber, or like, do you know what I mean? It just keeping you in the sort of the flow of the thing that you want to do, even if the actual thing is not the perfect solution. All right. God bless all of you. I'm just kind of scrolling down here. Healing. Some people had experience with narcissists. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for all these comments. I appreciate you all being here. If you are single, or if you are in connection with someone that you kind of know it's not really going anywhere, right? Either they are in a primary relationship elsewhere, or they've said that they're not available, or you discern they're emotionally unavailable, or you're kind of getting breadcrumbed, or they've kind of done some sort of ghosting and reappearing on the scene, or some version of that, then just keep an eye out, because I am likely to be launching a program in short order here that's going to be helping people with that. And people have been asking me for it, and I think it might be coming time to actually put something together. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'll be with you soon. All right. He says, now he's got to learn. I'm like, how do you end this thing? All right, end.